we must know our enemy's strategies.
Like a good song, marriage requires the right balance of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Longtime friends of the American Family Association, Barbie and Terry Franklin, share stories and music in their new DVD set, Love Sings, The Artistry of Marriage.
It'll change your marriage like this.
Produced by American Family Studios, Love Sings is now available at afastore.net.
Do you smell a rat in this at this point?
I don't know if I'd describe it a rat. I would just say that the answers I'm getting are not sufficient. Some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together. So in a sense, I have more questions today than I did when I first started.
Impeachment would be just the beginning of what he deserves. We should turn him over to the Saudis, his buddies, the same Saudis, who got rid of that reporter. Maybe they could do the same for him.
If the American people want a president to add to our division, lead with a clenched fist, a closed hand, a hard heart, to demonize your opponent, to spew hatred. They don't need me. They've got President Donald Trump.
We should turn him over to the Saudis.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to a brand new live broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. I am your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
Brian Fisher by name. And you, my friendly listening audience, are congenial, convivial, amiable, and also effervescent.
As always.
Glad to have you guys in the conversation today on Focal Point. Brand new week. We're going to hit the ground running. Today. Just a quick heads up. Want to let you know we're going to be running a special from now. I don't know the exact drop dead date, but starting today and running till whenever the deadline is. I'll let you know that tomorrow. I tried to get the information today, but I couldn't track it down. We're going to provide the incentive, if you want to call it that, of a signed copy of the Boy to Man book for Father's Day. We want to make this available. We want to encourage people to pick it up for Father's Day. Get a signed copy if you order a copy of the book starting today and up until whenever the drop dead date is. The deadline is the last day that we can be sure that you will get the book prior to Father's Day. So give that a thought. And I had a guy here coming through the offices last week, he and his wife, and he teaches sixth graders, and he's given some thought to picking up a copy of the book for each one of the fathers in his Sunday school class. That's kind of an end-of-the-year gift, something fathers then can read with their sons over the course of the summer, prepare them for the next stage in their journey toward manhood. And you can pick up a copy of the book if you would like at afastore.net. Where do you buy stuff from AFA? At the afastore.net. That's where you can get a copy, or if you choose more than one. I want to remind you we have podcasts at afr.net. Some of you asked about my shootout with Andrew Seidel from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So on last Wednesday's program, you go to our podcast page, click on the podcast button, scroll down the Focal Point, and you can find the podcast right there from last Wednesday. All right, well, let's jump into the Word of God. We're into a new section of Scripture today. We're getting toward the end of the Old Testament era, the end of the Old Testament period of history. And the book we're going to start today is the book of Esther. Great story, fabulous story. By the way, God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther. The book of Esther is the only book in the Bible where the name of God does not appear. And the point, I think, is not that God doesn't exist. It's a very effective and kind of attention-getting literary device, because God is the central player in this entire story, but he's never mentioned by name. You know, so everything looks like a coincidence in the book of Esther, but none of it is. All of it is under the superintending sovereign hand of God. And so everything looks coincidental, but nothing is. You know, somebody once said, and this is a great observation because it's true, that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. Looks to us like it's coincidence, looks to us like it's just good luck. It looks to us like it's just good fortune. In reality, it's God working behind the scenes. This is how he remains anonymous to engineer these creative coincidences. All right, so now we're in the book of Esther. We're told in verse 1 of the book, it's in the days of Ahasuerus, who ruled over India, or ruled over the region from India to Ethiopia from 485 BC to 464 BC. So we're now in the 5th century BC. Remember that Jerusalem fell in 586 BC. The temple was destroyed. The population was displaced. They were deported to Babylon. Then the Persians defeat the Babylonians. And a lot of the ones who were taken captive by Babylon now became citizens of the Persian Empire. Daniel, for instance, among them. So this is taking place about 100 years after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The Jews, the descendants of the Jews, find themselves in Persia, what is today Iran, and Esther becomes a central figure in the story. Her name, by the way, means star. So here we are, this Ahasuerus, very powerful king, 127 provinces he ruled over, all the way from the country of what is today India, all the way to northern Africa, to what is today Ethiopia. He ruled over all of that. Now, in the 3rd year of his reign, he decides he's going to have an Olympic party. I mean, this is going to be the party to blow out all parties, a 180-day party. He's going to invite people from all 127 provinces to come to his capital, which is in a place called Susa, and entertain them. That's like for 6 months. Entertain them for 6 months. So he wants to have a special banquet one night. He's not feeling any pain because he's had maybe a little too much of the fruit of the vine to drink. But his wife is beautiful. Her name is Queen Vashti. She's beautiful. He wants everybody to see how beautiful his wife is. He's proud of his wife. He admires her beauty. He wants everybody to be able to appreciate her beauty as he does. So he sends a message to her to come to the banquet hall so he can present her to the other guests. Because it says, in order to show the peoples and princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. And we'll see something here in just a second that verifies the counsel that the father of a very good friend of mine in college gave him. He told him all the time, he said, Jeff, beauty is only skin deep, but ugly goes right to the bone. So she gets an invitation to come from her husband to come and be presented before all of the guests because he's proud of her and wants everybody to see how beautiful she is. She flatly refuses to do it. Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. Now, how did the king respond? The king became enraged and his anger burned within him. Now, rather than just fly off and do something impulsive, he met together with the wise men who knew the times, who were versed in law and judgment. So he brought his group of counselors together, 7 of them all together. These were men that knew the law, they knew custom, they knew morality, they knew the times. And so, okay, guys, what should I do in the face of this reaction from my wife? Because everybody at this party knew about this. It was visible to everybody. And remember, you got representatives from all 127 provinces, which means that this thing is going to become known throughout the entire empire. So he wants to know, how should I handle this? I love my wife. She's beautiful. But what should we do in this case? What do we need to do to deal with this properly? And here's what his counselor said, and their counsel in this regard was absolutely correct. Not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt. They will say the same to all the king's officials. There will be contempt and wrath in plenty. So he suggested he make a law consistent with the laws of the Medes and Persians. I've talked with you about this before, but the law of the Persians and Medes, or the Medes and Persians, is a law that could not be broken, could not be revoked, could not be amended, could not be overwritten, even by the emperor himself. It was the law of the Medes and Persians. So it says, king, you need to make a law. Let the king make an order that Vashti is never to appear in your presence again, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she is. This is paving the way for Esther to come on the scene. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all of his kingdom, his counselor said, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. So there's a couple of lessons here that the sin that Vashti, as Ahasuerus' wife, the sin that she committed was not just a sin against her husband, but it was a sin against everyone in his sphere of influence and sphere of authority, because everyone saw it. When she publicly dishonored her husband, publicly disregarded him, publicly treated him with contempt, it was a sin against everybody who was under his authority and direction, everyone in his land. And so they knew, his counselors told him, this is going to disrupt every marriage in the land, because wives will see the example of Vashti, and they will be emboldened to imitate that behavior in their own marriages. And this is, by the way, why we ought to have an interest in the marriage relationships of candidates for public office. That's why, in my judgment, Pete Buttigieg, no way, no chance, no how, no possibility. He is in a so-called homosexual marriage. And what we learn from Esther is that example, it influences an entire country. So what happens in the marriage, or the so-called marriage, of the leader of a nation affects every marriage in the entire country. So it's not an incidental thing that you've got a man who is, quote, married to another man who wants to be the president of this land. It is not an incidental thing. But the bottom line takeaway, and this is a word I'm going to address to wives, I mean, it's also true for men, but the subject of chapter 1 is wives and their relationship with their husband. Wives, I want to urge you, I want to challenge you, never in public, speak with dishonor or disrespect of your husband. Never speak about him disrespectfully. If you have an issue with him, the place to talk about that and work it out is behind closed doors. In every circumstance where you are in the presence of other people, honor your husband and speak of him with love, speak of him with respect. All right, well, let's go to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Sovereign Lord, I pray this day for every marriage in my extended family, my city, and our nation. May each marriage be characterized by a spirit of mutual submission, which comes from a reverence for Christ. I pray that you will release into the heart of every wife the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. May each wife submit to her husband's headship in their home as she first submits herself to Christ. Protect her from despising her husband or treating him with contempt in any way. Instead, may she always treat him with honor and respect, that there may be harmony instead of discord in every home. I pray that wives will make themselves beautiful by putting their ultimate hope in you rather than their husbands. May they also do what is right and refuse to give way to fear. I pray that every husband will love his wife by being willing to lay down his life for her. May he submit himself to his wife, not by giving up his headship, but by refusing to use it simply to get his own way. Please bless every marriage in this land. In Jesus' name, amen.
And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Mass amounts of Muslims in Iran are converting to Christianity. At such a rapid pace, the Iranian government convened a meeting to find out why so many of its citizens are abandoning Islam and turning to Jesus. Iran remains a hardline Islamist nation. Christianity is illegal there, and conversions to Christianity result in torture, imprisonment, and social stigma for the new Christian and their families. Nevertheless, underground house churches continue to spring up across Iran. Though it's hard to get an accurate number, estimates have ranged from 800,000 to 2 million Christians now in Iran.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The recent outbreak of measles has focused attention on growing controversies about vaccines. I, for one, am extremely grateful for these vaccines that prevent terrible diseases. And I will never forget the first time that I heard the news as a third-grade boy that a doctor in New York named Jonas Salk had discovered a vaccination that would prevent people from getting the terrible scourge of polio. I lived in Houston, which had periodic epidemics of polio. I had elementary school classmates who came down with polio and ended up in wheelchairs or iron lungs. I was reminded of this when I read a short article in the Wall Street Journal this week about an iron lung in a museum in Nebraska. People younger than 70 have very little idea of what an iron lung is. A terrible contraption polio victims had to be encased in 24 hours a day, which breathed for them because their lungs had been paralyzed. I thank God polio has been virtually eradicated by the work of Dr. Jonas Salk and Dr. Sabin. Their dedication and their God-given talent led to the defeat of the scourge of polio, and now children encountering an iron lung in a museum have no idea what it is, and the director has to explain what this strange contraption is and why it is no longer needed. Thank God. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Hey, sounded like he was behind the plate calling balls and strikes. He sounded like an umpire on that.
Anyway, appreciate you being in the conversation today. We got a lot to get to. We are going to jump right into it. We are going to pedal as fast as we can. So many stories, so little time, no time to waste. Let's jump right in. Let's grab clip number R1, start right there at the top. Rob, this is Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, you're aware we've got some serious issues down at the border. We have the Border Patrol right now, as you are aware, is flying migrants, illegal alien migrants, from Texas to California 3 times per week to ease overcrowding. You know, they talk about white privilege. I've been talking about homosexual privilege. That's the only reason anybody's ever heard of Pete Buttigieg, because there's a preference that homosexuals have in our culture, and that's what he's benefiting from. He's going to draft behind his homosexual privilege, he hopes, all the way into the White House. Well, there's illegal alien migrant privilege. That privilege exists. If you're an illegal alien migrant, the Border Patrol, listen to this, they will welcome you into the United States. Good to have you here. Where would you like to go? Would you like to go to Detroit? Would you like to go to Miami? Would you like to go to Buffalo? We will fly you there for free, you and your whole family, and we'll put you up, and we'll give you a date to come before an immigration judge, and if you don't show up for that, no biggie. We won't come looking for you. You're welcome to the bounty of the United States of America. Knock yourselves out. But they're having to resort to these flights because they've got no place to put people. There is simply no place any longer to put people. There's no room for them. Their detention facilities are overcrowded. They're way in excess of capacity. Now they just have no place to put people. So the alternative is them sleep out in the desert in the cold and the wind and the rain and whatever, or ship them all over the country. You know, and DHS apparently has backed off Trump's plan to send people to sanctuary cities, but Kirsten Gillibrand saying that they would love to have them. Kirsten Gillibrand said in New York, we would love to have these illegal alien migrants. Here's what she says. This is clip R1, Kirsten Gillibrand. She wants to be our next president, ladies and gentlemen.
We would be delighted to take refugee families into cities like Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester. As President of the United States, I wouldn't use the detention system at all. In fact, what I would do is actually fund the border security measures that are anti-terrorism, anti-human trafficking, anti-drug trafficking, and anti-gun trafficking. And I would defund these for-profit prison systems that are harming children and harming families who are seeking our asylum. If they're given a lawyer and given a process, they will follow it. They can go into the community in the way we used to handle these cases under the Department of Justice.
All right, so that's Kirsten Gillibrand. If I'm president, I'm not going to detain anybody. Nobody will be detained. No illegal alien trespasser will be detained under a Kirsten Gillibrand presidency. And people in my home state of New York, Buffalo, bring them. Buffalo will take them. Syracuse, bring all the illegal aliens you want to Syracuse, drop them off. Rochester will take them. Albany will take them. You know, and I think it's way past time to say to President Trump, look, take them up on this. Here is an elected representative from the state of New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, inviting you to bring illegal alien migrant families and dump them in her state. Time to take them up on it. Do the same thing with sanctuary cities. Apparently they're backing off of that. I think they're just afraid of the backlash. But we just need to have the courage to say, okay, sanctuary cities, they have declared to the rest of the world that this is a place where illegal aliens have a home. This is a place where illegal alien trespassers will not be harassed. They will not be troubled. Here is a place where illegal aliens who have committed atrocious crimes can come, and they will be safe here. They will be protected. We will surround you with our sheltering arms to keep you from all harm, including any possibility of going to prison for killing people. Got the story out of Dallas where there's an illegal alien, been in the country illegally since 2010. He's now been charged with the murder of 12 people, all of them elderly women. He works or goes to these assisted care facilities. They have a lot of elderly women. He seeks them out and he snuffs them out. And he's been in the country illegally since 2010. So, again, you know, I think President Trump ought to just go ahead and do what he said he was going to do. Let's send these illegals en masse. You got the planes, obviously, or you've got the buses. Load them up on buses. Drive them to sanctuary cities. I will flat out guarantee you there are a lot of sanctuary cities within a day's drive of the border. Whichever direction you go, you can find a sanctuary city, drive them up, and drop them off, come back, pick up another load, and repeat the process. You know, they're having 100,000 apprehensions a month at the border, 100,000 a month. That's over 1 million in the course of a year. And right now, our Border Patrol is releasing thousands of people at a time. Border Patrol says it's detaining about 8,000 people at a time in the Rio Grande Valley, which is double its maximum capacity, and they've been releasing sometimes as many as 1,000 illegal aliens a day into the interior of the border. So anyway, time for that nonsense to come to an absolute screaming halt. And as we've just heard from Kirsten Gillibrand, she is not going to be the one to bring that nonsense to a stop. All right, let's grab clip number 1. Talking a lot about Bill Barr, the Attorney General, and this Steele dossier. A lot of stuff in that is really majorly hinky. And Bill Barr was interviewed by Bill Hemmer of Fox News. Pretty good interview. And Bill Hemmer did a good job of asking him a range of questions. Bill Barr did not feel free to answer all of them, but he was asked all of the important questions. So Bill Hemmer did a good job. Even Chris Wallace said, you know, when I look at somebody else doing an interview, I always ask myself how I would have done it, how could I have done it better? And Chris Wallace said, you know, I think Bill Hemmer just did a bang-up job with Bill Barr. So here they are talking about the dossier. The Steele dossier, remember, was this unverified document. Everything in it was unverified. A lot of assertions, a lot of salacious accusations concerning President Trump, for instance, cavorting with prostitutes in a hotel room in Moscow, and lots of other stuff beyond that. And, of course, it turns out we've discovered that not one single solitary thing in that dossier was verified. None of it was verified. Every last little bit in that dossier is unverified information. So here is Bill Hemmer asking Bill Barr about the use of this dossier to start a counterintelligence investigation. Don't forget that this was not a criminal investigation of President Trump. It was a counterintelligence investigation, which is designed exclusively to get to keep an eye on what foreign bad actors are doing. You go to a FISA court. You know what the F in FISA stands for? Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So you want to investigate a foreigner because you think he's doing something hinky. He might be compromising the United States. He might be trying to weasel into stuff he has no business being. That's what you go to a FISA court for. And that's to gather intelligence to find out what the guy's up to, because you can't prosecute somebody who's works for a foreign government, diplomatic community and all that. You're not going to be able to prosecute him very long or very far in the United States. So anyway, Bill Hemmer asked Bill Barr, well, what about using this dossier? Remember, it was just opposition research funded by Hillary Clinton, funded by the Democratic National Committee, using Christopher Steele, who was a guy that was already leaking like a sieve to the media, which violated his basic responsibility and agreement with the Department of Justice. They finally had to fire him because he was leaking all over the place to the media, even admitted in an interview with a State Department employee 10 days before they got the FISA warrant that he was regularly in touch with the Washington Post and the New York Times. So he's leaking like a bucket. And yet they still kept him. They didn't fire him until after they'd gotten the FISA warrant because they didn't want to jeopardize their ability to spy on President Trump. All right, Bill Hemmer talking to Bill Barr about the Steele dossier and the counterintelligence investigation into President Trump.
Can you tell us what the Steele dossier had to do with this? What role did that play?
Well, that's one of the questions, that we're going to have to look at. It's a very unusual situation to have opposition research like that, especially one that on its face had a number of clear mistakes and a somewhat jejune analysis, and to use that to conduct counterintelligence against an American political campaign is would be a strange development. I'm not sure what role it played, but that's something we have to look at.
Do you smell a rat in this at this point?
I don't know if I'd describe it a rat. I would just say that the answers I'm getting are not sufficient.
In other words, the kind of answers I'm getting are the kind of answers you would expect from a rat. Bill Hemmer, in answer to your question. All right, clip number 2. Because there's a real question about when the spying on the Trump campaign began. And Bill Barr has said he's going to get to the bottom of that. That's what's making everybody quake in their boots. Like James Comey trying to blame John Brennan. Brennan's the one that wanted to get this into the public sphere. And Brennan saying, no, it was James Comey that wanted to insert this thing into the public record and get this thing leaked to the public. So they're pointing fingers at each other, which is significant because nobody wants to own up to it. You know, if the Steele dossier was an important piece of information for the public to have access to, if it's the thing that's going to revealing the truth about the Donald Trump presidency, you'd want to take credit for it. You'd be out there competing. No, James Comey. It wasn't John Brennan's idea to get this to the public. It was mine. This was my idea to talk to the press about this, and I am proud of the work that we did. I'm proud of the Steele dossier, but nobody's doing that. Everybody's trying to point the finger of blame at somebody else. All right, here's Bill Hemmer talking to Bill Barr about spying on the Trump campaign.
I've been trying to get answers to questions, and I found that a lot of the answers have been inadequate. And I've also found that some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together. So in a sense, I have more questions today than I did when I first started.
Some of what things don't hang together?
Some of the explanations of what occurred.
Why does that matter?
Well, because I think people have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened, but I'm saying that we have to look at that.
You know, that's why these guys are completely freaked and completely spooked, because they know the kind of stuff that Bill Barr's talking about. These are criminal kinds of investigations. People go to jail, people go to prison behind what these folks have done. And Bill Barr says, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And the problem for Democrats is they know that he means business. They know that Bill Barr is going to do it. He is going to wind up getting to the bottom of whatever's going on here. And by the way, I do not think we ever have to worry about Bob Mueller testifying before Congress. And I will tell you why. One very simple reason. Bob Mueller will never, ever testify before a democratically run House of Representatives for the simple reason that Republicans get to ask questions too. Now, the Democrats will be fine. They're the only ones that got to ask questions, but that's not how it works in a democratic republic. The other side gets to ask questions too. You know, and Republicans are going to have some serious questions for Bob Mueller, and they would not be able to wait to ask him under oath some of these questions. And this is why Bob Mueller's never going to show up, because he doesn't want to answer these questions. He'd rather get eaten alive by ants than answer some of these questions. Now, for instance, you know, Mr. Mueller, the guidelines for the Department of Justice are very, very clear. You're a special prosecutor, and the guidelines are very clear that if you are not going to indict somebody, you're supposed to shut up. Your choices are either indict or shut up. And if you don't indict a subject, you are not supposed to include a single piece of derogatory information about that person at all, because we don't want to shred the reputation of somebody who is innocent of anything that he's been suspected of doing. So can you tell us, Mr. Pure and Clean, Mr. Snow-driven Bob Mueller, Mr. Picture of Integrity, can you tell us why Volume 2 of your report is nothing but smears, lies, and unproven innuendo about the President of the United States? Can you explain that to us, Mr. Mueller? You think he wants to answer that question? Absolutely not. So, Mr. Mueller, can you tell us when you knew that there was no collusion between Trump and Russia? Remember, I don't know if you know this, I didn't find it, just the research doing for the program today, but Mueller's crew, they stopped asking for FISA warrants, more than a year before the report was released. So they realized that's a dry hole. There's nothing here. There's no point in even asking for any more warrants because there's nothing to gather. There's no more information to gather. And when did you recognize, Mr. Mueller, that there was something hinky about the Steele dossier? when did you begin to recognize that some of this information was not only salacious but unverified? Remember, James Comey said in June of 2017, remember the first FISA warrant was October of 2016. James Comey is saying 10 months later, this is unverified and salacious information in the Steele dossier. He knew it was bad. He knew it stunk to the heavens, and yet they still use it as a basis for the warrant. We'll be right back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The Trump administration may want to auto-enroll senior citizens into Medicare Advantage. If implemented, seniors would be put in Medicare HMOs without their consent. If they wanted to switch to Original Medicare, where they can see any doctor anywhere, the burden would be on them. Auto-enrollment is a bad idea. Medicare Advantage HMOs often deny access to needed care. If their denials are appealed, these HMOs overturn the denial 75% of the time, but only 1% of denials are appealed. The federal report says the process may be difficult for critically ill patients. Seniors need choice, not auto-enrollment.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
AFR's own J.J. Jasper is a morning on-air personality, author, comedian, Christian, and family man. J.J.'s also a keynote speaker at banquets, men's ministry events, pregnancy center fundraisers, and more.
This is Penny Weaver from Decatur, Illinois. Last year, we had the privilege of J.J. Jasper as our speaker. We had our largest fundraising banquet ever.
Information on J.J.'s availability to speak at your event is at jjjasper.com.
Nikki Addison.
My challenge to you was to evangelize your children and to disciple your children and to give them the truth, because if you don't do that, then we have a culture that's waiting in the wings to disciple your kids and to make converts. And so I really believe and I expect the Lord to really set some people free today.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time, so that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt, and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Jeff Reed, our esteemed producer, brings us daily Reed reports, and he's got a couple that I think are very interesting for our listening audience. Let's begin with the first one, because I've got personal input on this one.
Yeah, a lot of kids are getting out of school and people are planning summer trips. And a new report has come out that 73% of Americans would rather take a road trip than fly. What's surprising about this is they would happily add 6.5 hours to their travel time if it meant they can avoid an airport. And some of those some would venture to even say 6.5 hours could be spent on time getting to the airport, going through, finding parking, getting to the checkout, checked in, then going through security, all that kind of stuff. Plane delays on the way or layovers, and then being picked up or renting a car at your destination. that may easily equal 6.5 hours in some cases. The reasons people are preferring driving over flying right now is the biggest grievances with flying is delays, going through security, cramped seats, and the inability to pack everything they'd like to. Whereas in cars, people prefer it because they can have the freedom to stop whenever they want, pack whatever you want, and the scenic views.
Yep. You know, and Ed Vitagliano and Wesley Wildman and the executive producer of Focal Point, we have probably spoken at a couple of dozen donor events over the last 2 or 3 years. We've kind of finished the current schedule, but we've traveled to probably 24 different cities in the United States to speak to our donors and express our appreciation for them. And there are a few of them that have been close enough we could drive to in a matter of 5 or 6 hours, and we've done that, and absolutely agree with everybody in that. You know, if you need to take another piece of luggage, just throw it in the back of the van.
Yeah,
and off you go.
You know, half the fun of driving is going to towns where they have restaurants and things that you don't have in your town. You know, you can stop and get a good meal for a reasonable price compared to the airport where you pay $15 for a ham sandwich, $5 for a Coke, you know.
You know, and the other thing is we had great conversations in the van. We had great conversations driving to our destinations, which you don't have when you're wedged into a tin can next to somebody that you don't know, you've never seen before, you never will see again. In fact, you hope you never see them again. What kind of conversation are you going to have there?
And for tall guys like you and I, the leg space has gotten
they're just miserable. You know, remember that line from The Right Stuff where Chuck Yeager's talking about the astronauts as spam in a can?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you are on a passenger airplane today. You are spam in a tube.
Yeah,
spam in a
flying
can.
used to be a lot of fun. I mean, it was kind of a fun thing to go do. It was
little
exciting.
A little bit
and now
exotic.
There's so much stress involved compared to the kind of relaxing when you're driving, except for when you're in big cities.
Yeah, now planes are just the Greyhound buses of today, and they're not even as appealing as a Greyhound bus.
Yeah.
At least in a Greyhound bus, you can kind of get up and kind of move around a little. You got a little bit of space. Seats are a little wider, but man, forget about it on a plane. All right, and the other story has this is a winnable war moment from Australia, of all places.
Yeah, well, there's a guy named Bill Hayden, a famous Australian Governor General, who made it no secret that he was an atheist, has accepted Christ at the age of 85.
Amen. 85.
85. Ooh. He was one of these atheists, not only outspoken, but he would actually have some of his public policies and beliefs go on the attack of Christianity, but not anymore. Not anymore. He said that he's decided to make a dedication of myself for the good of others before God. I feel that strongly. It took too long, but now I'm going to be devoted. From this day forward, I'm going to vouch for God.
Good for him. So it's never too late. If you're out there and you're in your 80s and you stumbled across this radio program and you know that you're not right with God right now, you're astray from him, you're not where you should be, it is never too late, ladies and gentlemen. We saw that in the book of 2 Chronicles going through it in the last few weeks. These kings that turned away from God but then turned back to God at the end of their lives. They humbled themselves before God. God picked them up, and God restored them. All right, good stuff. And by the way, out of Australia, there's another winnable war moment. The Australian Prime Minister down there, a guy by the name of Scott Morrison, was reelected. By his own description, he is a devout Christian. And he defeated a guy whose campaign platform was all about climate change. All about environmentalism, all about catastrophic global warming, and the polls were surprised, but it was a stunning victory. So a devout Christian who's not into the whole climate change thing, he's a guy that's gotten trouble in Australia already by advocating that asylum seekers that come to Australia should be denied the privilege of seeking asylum in the country. He's expressed admiration for President Trump and he's promised voters he's going to work on lower energy prices rather than lower sea levels. Good for him.
So we've seen this kind of move now, and even in other countries, toward a more nationalism than the globalism. We've seen it happen in Italy, Brazil, and now Australia, well, and the United States, of course. That's a good sign.
Yeah, things are moving in a lot of places in a good direction. All right, let's go to Amy Klobuchar. This is a woman that also wants to be your president. Remember, she's the one that she was on a plane and she ate her salad with a comb, a hair comb.
What?
Yeah. She had an aide pick up lunch for her to eat on the plane. And he forgot to pick up that little plastic bags with the plastic fork and the plastic spoon. And so he gave it to her, but there was no fork or spoon in it. She was irate. She went off on him, but she was hungry, so she pulled a comb, a hair comb, out of her travel bag and ate the salad with her travel comb. So this woman wants to be your next president, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to clip number 3. Here's Amy Klobuchar talking to Chris Wallace of Fox News about the pro-life issue. Remember, a lot of conversation on that because of the Alabama bill in particular, which basically prohibits abortions entirely. No exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest. That's my personal view. I believe it ought to be our view, because if you are going to allow a baby who's been conceived because of rape or incest to be executed, you are punishing the child for the sin of the father. We do not do that in America. We do not do that in a land where we're guided in any way by the Judeo-Christian tradition. So let's see how Amy Klobuchar answers this question, clip 3.
But, Senator, pro-life advocates are pushing back. There's a group called Restoration PAC, and they are now running an ad on Facebook that we're showing right now, showing what it calls the party of death. 6 Democratic senators running for president, including you, who have opposed restrictions in the later stages of pregnancy. You talk about the extreme, as you call it, on one side. Let me make the case, and you can answer it, on the other side, because folks say that one of the concerns is that a number of Democratic senators are not willing to see restrictions on late-term abortions, abortions after 24 weeks as we enter the third trimester. Now, that's only 1% of all abortions in the country, but even 1% is 6,000 abortions after 24 weeks when a fetus might well be viable. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with the law, Chris, and what the law says is that in that third trimester, it is allowed to protect the health and the life of the mother.
Now, when she's referring to the law, she's referring to Roe v. Wade, which is a Supreme Court opinion. It is an opinion. It is not a law. According to Article 1, the Supreme Court has 0 constitutional authority to make law. None, zip, 0, nada, zilch. There is no law in America that affirms the right to abortion. None, zip, squat. It's up to states to do it, and the states are routinely banning abortion or limiting abortion. Well, I don't want to say it's not legal anywhere, because there are states that have legalized abortions that we're going to have it up to the moment a child's born. In fact, you can kill a child after it's born. That's New York and Virginia. You can wait till the child is born, and then you decide what to do. Then you decide whether to kill it or keep it. So there are laws, state laws, that do permit abortion through all 9 months and beyond. I mean, that's not just 9 months of pregnancy. That's 9 months plus. So there is no law. And by the way, one of the big justifications on the part of the pro-death crowd is you need to have abortion in case you need it to save the life or the health of the mother. And I'm looking at a piece here from liveaction.org. The Supreme Court ruling in Doe v. Bolton defined maternal health so broadly that it can be exercised in light of all factors. I'm reading a quote from the Doe v. Bolton decision: physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age, all being relevant to the well-being of the patient. So the Supreme Court said, Doe v. Bolton, you can terminate a late-term pregnancy for any reason. If a woman just doesn't like it, if it'll affect her mental health, state of being, you can terminate the pregnancy. But here's the other side. The American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they got 2,500 members. They published a statement back in 2009. It's still up there. They haven't changed it. Abortion is the purposeful killing of the unborn in the termination of pregnancy. When you deliver a baby prematurely because it's putting pressure on the mother's body or mother's health, that's not an abortion to save the mother's life. That saves the life of the baby. In other words, they say, look, our obligation as medical doctors is to save life. And the reality in a pregnancy, what they're saying is we are treating two patients, not one. We're treating the mother and the baby. And therefore, these pediatricians say, and obstetricians, every reasonable attempt should be made to save the baby's life. That's also a part of our medical intervention, not just to save the life of the mother. We want to save them both. Sometimes they recognize that a baby would be born too premature to survive, but you still give it a chance at life. The Dublin Declaration has been signed by over 1,000 medical providers. And here's what it says. As experienced practitioners and researchers in obstetrics and gynecology, we affirm that direct abortion is not medically necessary to save the life of a woman. This is all signed by medical professionals. It is not, the direct abortion is not medically necessary to save the life of a woman. So that whole business, got to have it in there, got to have an exception for life, just does not exist.
I saw a video just last night on, I guess it was on Facebook, of a young lady that was a product of rape. And she said, I'm so thankful that I wasn't murdered for the sins of my father, just like what you spoke about earlier.
Was that Rebecca Kiesling? I believe
so. I don't remember her name. So. It was powerful, and it's really a valid point on the rape controversy of what they're using about rape.
Yeah,
that's a human life. That's not the person that committed the crime.
Yeah, if somebody needs to be punished for the rape, how about we punish the rapist?
Yeah.
How about we put him to death instead of the child that he sired? How about that? All right, clip number 4. This is Fran Lebowitz. She's a leftist talking with Bill Maher, M-A-H-E-R, Bill Maher, about what ought to be done to Donald Trump. And she's talking here about the Saudi Arabians. Remember, they sawed a guy in pieces with a bone saw. A journalist they didn't like. They strangled him to death. They sawed his body up in pieces. Listen to Fran Lebowitz.
Where are you on impeachment? Yes, no?
I change my mind from day to day. I mean, where am I on impeachment? Certainly he deserves to be impeached. I mean...
Deserves? I know. We all think that. But...
Impeachment would be just the beginning of what he deserves. Not even scratching the surface of what he deserves.
But it's a practical matter. It's a practical matter.
Whenever, I think about this and what he really deserves, I think we should turn him over to the Saudis, his buddies. The same Saudis, who got rid of that reporter. Maybe they could do the same for him.
And there's the audience going off again. I think we ought to turn him over to the Saudis so they can cut him into pieces with a bone saw. And the crowd loved it. They ate it up. Bill Maher actually kind of challenged her, and she eventually pseudo-apologized. Clip 5.
No matter who the president is, we do not want physical harm.
No, exactly. I did not mean that.
And you didn't.
And I regret saying it.
Right.
I regret that everyone misinterpreted it.
Yes.
Because they misinterpret everything.
Misinterpret everything. How do you misinterpret turning him over to the Saudis so they can do to President Trump what they did to the journalist, which is to cut his body in pieces with a bone saw? How do you misinterpret that? That's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man. Stand in the gap and never forget we are fighting winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day,